Hello, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Vishal Gupta, Kabila Life. I think this is a tremendous platform. And yes, China is a very important global player. I wish those people at the back either come forward or turn on the volume a bit. Thank you. In terms of AI, China had got a plan to become #1 AI economy in the world by 2030. And there's been quite a progress in terms of reaching that deadline. The State Council has written down, a platform right below the Congress has written down a number of deadline 2020, 2025, and 2030. 2020 is about setting down some code of ethics standards to control the development of AI, where the UK is one of the global leaders in that sector. So China and UK development of AI is not just in terms of technology progress or technology scale-up. It's also against safeguarding the future of development of AI, safeguarding public safety. I'm a regular visitor to APPG, All Parliamentary Party Group in the Parliament. And AI is one of the most important aspects or technology that's discussed at the Parliament. China and UK are becoming very special friends, the same special friend that we've been talking about in terms of China, I beg your pardon, UK and US. I have a very distinguished panel here, and they have all experience of either working in UK technology landscape or China, or together, both of them. So without any further ado, I'm going to go to first thing I'm going to do is to ask and try to demystify what AI is. We've been listening to these two letters, AI, but it's important to understand what's the difference between a functionality of a software application and AI. So I'm going to ask Thomas first. Thomas, just give us some overview of AI so the public, we can go on to bigger things.
Thank you. Maybe that's working better.
And introduce yourself too, very quickly.
Thank you so much, Syrus. Hi, so this is Thomas Balkizas. I am CEO and founder of Alpha Tech Capital. I've worked for some AI and healthcare companies in my career, most notably maybe IBM Watson Health. So I get to go first and maybe do some definitions. I think the main definition that I want to draw, and I only caught the tail end of the previous discussion, is that the way that we're using the term artificial intelligence is predominantly wrong. So basically what we mean by artificial intelligence in this field is any form of machine that simulates human intelligence. And as a sort of, I don't like the word expert, but someone who's worked in this for the best part of 16 years, there's very little artificial intelligence that you're actually interacting with. Most of what you're doing as consumers and what we're doing as patients, as business people, is machine learning. And that's a broader term. And it's a more accurate term. So it's things that machines, when trained, can start to do that resemble something that we used to do through programmable sort of function. And I'll just draw one example here. So if you take a system that we now call an AI system, you take a system that you can automate something, so you can have a chat with it, chatbot. That's an example of machine learning. After you've trained it on a domain, it can maybe help you with your insurance question. You can have a conversation about your bank account. But if you put that into another domain, perhaps in aerospace, it will probably be completely useless because it doesn't understand the questions and the domain. So there is an element of training. Now, different companies have taken different approaches, and obviously we're really excited to be at a hub, almost the Silicon Valley of the UK, and Google DeepMind have done this through simulations. IBM did it through training. But the main distinction I wanted to draw is AI and machine learning. Most of what we refer to as artificial intelligence really isn't. And it has a very long history behind it, which I don't think is the time to go into. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much. One of the most strategic platforms that plays a big part between collaboration between China and UK is Cocoon Network. And we have here John Zai, of the founder, CEO of Cocoon Network. John, you are very well known, but I need to introduce you to the crowd. You can do that better than me. Can you just introduce yourself and tell us what role Cocoon Network plays in that collaboration, as well as give us some example of the landscape that exists in China in AI sector?
This probably can be talking for a long time. I mean, we have different role, I mean, in different stage. I think about 4 years ago, when we first come to UK, our purpose is very simple. We just try to looking for the technology which we believe they will have the potential in China market. The reason is very simple, because European startup companies' valuation it's very low, to be honest, compared with American and in China. So 4 years ago, we are kind of like a venture capital role. And then 3 years ago, we realized as a Chinese venture capital firm, it's very difficult to find some real good deal in London, because, you know, VC is just a local business, and London is like a VC world is very tight. So we starting, you know, we try to attracting as much as possible startup companies. So we're starting getting involved in lots of accelerator program. I think I almost working with all the potentially, you know, famous accelerator program in London, try to bring them connect with the China. So we're starting doing a lot of like accelerator program. I still remember we did one called Go China program, very simple. And we starting become, you know, by the way, we actually having probably the biggest innovation center in the all over the, a little bit smaller than the rock space, but we are probably the, you know, because we are in a very central location. So we're starting to become a physical innovation stuff. And 2 years ago, we realized we need to do something more like a VC firm, more like an accelerate incubator program. We should be doing something like a platform, because it's only to build an ecosystem between China and UK. Otherwise, I don't know how to actually making all these things happen. And then 1 year, I mean, for now, I mean, I think we become like a bridge, because we probably is the most activity group which is connect the UK, China in terms of the innovation, technology, and investment. In terms of the AI thing, I think, I mean, basically, AI is going to be replaced everything in the future. I guess maybe some particular area you can't, but in the most general thing, people talking about normal job, like 90% of the normal job is going to be replaced. And I think because of the population and the market size China have it, I think AI will be, you know, in China will be the biggest AI market in the future. I think most of people will agree about that. Yeah.
Thank you, John. I come to you, Hugo. First of all, please introduce yourself and tell us, you are very much driven by blockchain too. Give us some examples of some of the verticals, that some of the applications that are used in blockchain that UK is very renowned for. And also, let's go into Europe as well. Although we are facing Brexit, but we are still European. So I think it's important to play harmonious notes there.
Yeah, at least for now. So my name is Hugo Pinto. I'm a managing director at Accenture Digital. I work mostly focused around industry, oil and gas, energy and utilities. I think critical infrastructure is an area of tremendous potential, mostly because the way we run a very old infrastructure has become very inefficient. I think ecosystems and value chains are becoming closer and closer, and all of them are applying different types of digital techniques and approaches to modernize. And I think there are three key technologies that are going to come into play together. One of them is obviously IoT, to digitize the data that actually captures what is happening in the physical world. Secondly is going to be blockchain, and blockchain, don't see it as this highly technical platform that is a black box type thing. It's not. It's a missing link between business functions and processes and value exchanges that transform that data into outcomes, into augmenting or accelerating processes that typically would have to be done manually, in batch, and hence non-efficiently. If you have this availability of data and this immediateness in actually accelerating the way all of these processes are managed, AI will play a huge role, right? And even if it's machine learning for now, more narrow forms of AI, I think there is huge potential, especially in manufacturing, in critical infrastructure, and resources area, to make things much more efficient, right? I think the other interesting angle that we're starting to find with some of our clients is there is a need to bring the technology and the software development together with the hardware that these industries use and with the knowledge, with the technical knowledge of the people on the ground of how these operations work. So there is a tremendous opportunity to bring large industrial and production capability, for instance, from China, with the availability of manpower and talent to come and solve some of these challenges together with the knowledge of legacy infrastructures, just like in the UK, but then still for the rest of Europe and even the rest of the Western world. So I think it's a big opportunity of seeing the wider ecosystem. So great to actually be in this discussion.
Thank you. Allan, they say you are from Shanghai, and I know that the definition of a Shanghainese is not quite born in Shanghai. They may have come from other parts of China to Shanghai. But they say Shanghai is software while Shenzhen is hardware. How would you put that? And also, what's the definition or what's the importance of a good strategic partner in China for British or European technology, startup, early stage, to move into China?
I mean, hi guys, hi everyone. I was just thinking on the way over, you know, we're on a China panel at O2, so that means it's CO2, so that's very important. But it's great to be here. Thank you for that question. Well, actually, you know, talking about Shanghai, so I run an early stage, I guess, well, we can call it a tech, early stage tech and corporate innovation fund. Okay, so the reason why we put early tech and innovation, corporate innovation together is the fact that they go hand in hand, right? And we picked Shanghai as opposed to Shenzhen because one, if you look at the number of unicorns grown in China, half is in Beijing, a third is in Shanghai, and then the rest are split among Shenzhen and Hangzhou, and then the rest of China. So Shanghai is actually, in many ways, underappreciated, I think. So that's why, you know, we picked Shanghai to do this. I actually live there. You know, my good friend John here actually is born there. That's even more. And he's actually here, and then he's, you know, obviously in Shenzhen and in Beijing. But and we want to work with John and Cocoon to try to make sure that if there are any great projects that can actually go back and land in China, we want them in Shanghai, actually. Okay, and we want to make that as a focus. Now, so that's the difference between Shanghai and I think Shenzhen. Shenzhen's very aggressive. I just did a China VC conference, a forum in Shenzhen, and you can see the fact that there's a lot of concentration of capital attention to Shenzhen. Historically, I'll just very quickly mention this is the reason why it's so important. Shenzhen was started by Xi Jinping, the president's father. So as a good son, he's going to make sure that Shenzhen will stay in play for a long time to come. But the proximity, the Greater Bay Area, so for Shenzhen, there's a new initiative. It's called the Greater Bay Area Initiative. So that includes the economic zone, includes Hong Kong, Macau, Zhuhai, and then Shenzhen. The idea is that the combined power of economic status and economic prowess will overdo other areas. Now that's a very significant move because once you have a location like Hong Kong, which is independent in many ways, that has a tremendous amount of flexibility when you talk about blockchain, right? Actually, I always thought, why isn't Hong Kong owning blockchain and cryptocurrency, right? It has the flexibility of global economic financial markets without the China restraints, and yet it's not moving fast enough in the area. So I think that there are many issues that we're going to have to sort of sort out in terms of who's doing what and where to do it. But for AI, for what's happening, you can do AI anywhere, right? It's like what Thomas said. It is machine learning, but what's most important about machine learning in China is the data, right? So now the controversy here is the fact that China you'll be able to get your hands on more data of consumer behavior than any other location in the world. So therefore, machine learning will work because you have all the data. So I think that the data portion of this is going to be extremely competitive. And therefore, I think that if you're going into China, we hope that you would settle in Shanghai. Yeah.
Thank you, Allan. Thomas, recently we were involved in doing a couple of deals, entertaining a delegation from China. Let's go to challenges. We dealt with, there was a language barrier, there's a cultural barrier, there's all kinds of things. I think the crowd wants to know what it takes to do business with China. What are the issues, what are the challenges that you faced? And what are the rewards?
I'm glad you steered that question that way. So, I mean, it's for someone with a European, I'm a Greek national, but I've been here for sort of 16 years, and Europeans, we've assimilated quite well together. So we get along, we understand each other, but we do have our differences. I think it comes to a head when you realize the language barrier. No matter how many hours I spend on the Tube or Duolingo, my Mandarin Chinese isn't really improving, so I need to do something. And Duolingo is actually powered by AI. There's a few things. So one of the key points, I think, is language is a barrier, but it's also about style. So a lot about it is, I found a lot of similarities with the Chinese delegation than other people I work with every day. So, style is truly important. And then I'd rather focus on the similarities rather than the differences. So, similarities, we all have an interest in technology. We all are trying to do the right thing in the space of, in this case, it was something completely different to healthcare, but it was based on, again, on technology and clean energy. I will bring you back to the point that you raised. I think it was a really good point in that there's a perspective that comes from China which is very visionary. It's very strategic. I think we would laugh a person out of the room if they said, in 2030, we aim to be the #1 country in AI. We're much more short-term, and I'm generalizing here, but the UK, where we're here, London is short-term. London is about the next quarter and the next year. We don't know, and don't quote me on that. We don't know who's going to be in charge in a year's time. This is a luxury that it's afforded to a country as big as China and as powerful as China because they can actually set strategy and say that. So I think they were a lot more strategic. And what we witnessed over that weekend was that when they say we'll get there, the vision is very clear. They're flexible on the details, but the vision is very clear. Whereas I don't think we have that clarity. The vision, and I'm sure Hugo may disagree with me. And the final point I want to make is that there's a very clear wedge between Europe and China in terms of the data access. So we're moving to an integration, and with good reason, with GDPR and so on, we're having less and less access. My domain is healthcare and technology, and we were struggling to get access to good data before, and we're going to struggle even more now. So some of the companies I worked with or for. They want to do the right thing in cancer care, for instance, and the interpretation of the same law is different in each country. I don't know if you're finding that. But I'd be interested in finding out what you're thinking. But the point that brings it to clarity is that in China you have restrictions. You have restrictions for clinical trials. There's protections for privacy, but it's much more clear, and I think it's much more unified. I don't know if it's a city-by-city case, but the ideas that come out of that for things like clinical trials, for things like technology innovation, do not have the barriers that we have. I have to go to Germany and set up a business with lawyers in Germany, and the interpretation is different. France, the UK. So we call it the European Union. It really isn't. It's a United States of different nations that do their own thing, and there's a couple of asterisks. So yes, style issues, language barriers, but the main thing, I think, is the drive to want to do the right thing, and that's what I think I'm hearing from the gentleman here, and also the context that we have.
Right. John, it's a two-way collaboration. Chinese companies want to come to UK too, and you help them as well. Tell us some of the challenges that they face when they come here in terms of scaling up, IPO, and so on and so forth.
For a Chinese company come to UK, I guess the biggest issue is they still think they're in China. I guess, because this is a totally different world. For example, I think the reason why Cocoon Networks has become one of the most activity is because our blood was actually China, but we're actually born in London. We're actually built up in London. We are different because normally it's, for example, a lot of big company, they establish very well in China, and they starting trying to doing some kind of office. They want to do some innovation center in Europe, in UK. But we are different. We're actually starting from here, and now we go back to China. And I guess I can give you a couple points. First of all, let's divide them separate them into the big company and small company. For example, imagine a Chinese company, if they are not mature enough in China market, and they think about to go to UK, I think they don't having any strength anyway. But if it's a very mature company, usually, I don't want to say this but basically they are not very seriously to doing international marketing. I'm not talking about Alibaba or Huawei. They have a couple of thousand. Huawei have 2,000. Alibaba having a lot. But they have no problem because they're super big company. But for any normal Chinese company, I think it's only basically there's only a few purpose they want to doing, selling their product. So they don't actually thinking they were having a proper company in UK, probably just a marketing or sales department in UK, just want to selling the product. But the problem is, you're selling a product, you have to having the branding, you have to having a support channel. It's not just like you coming here, what are you doing in China? And the other way, for example, some venture capital firm, they just put one person, try to funding the best deal, which I don't think is happening. We have around 50 people working in London. But unless you are a Fuxing, right? You have I think they only have 11 people. But they're actually having only one people looking in the early stage here. But they are different because they are Fuxing. But I'm thinking for a normal Chinese company, they have to treat UK or international marketing different. They can't still thinking they are in China. They're having the relationship with the relationship with everyone. They have to starting from zero. They have to starting from nothing. So they have to be serious there, I guess.
Thank you, John. In terms of, Hugo, in terms of challenges with IP and IP copying has always been a discussion that is going to go around for some time. What are the challenges that that companies that are scaling up are facing, and how do you would help them ease that entry? You can spend as much money as you want with the lawyers registering your IP, but at the end of the day, isn't a strong partner so important?
So I think there's a couple of points on IP, right? One of them is there's different frameworks between managing IP in China, managing IP in other parts of Asia, managing IP in Europe, and then managing IP in the US, and then you still have Africa and Latin America to deal with, right? Those are different, and even the Middle East. All different scenarios to managing IP. Some of the things you might do in Western economies are valid to some of those regions, many are not. But let me pick up on the point that was raised earlier. I think there's a bigger challenge than just the IP and just the product end of doing business, right? And I think technology and AI in particular now, the biggest problem it has is a design problem, right? A design, what outcome does it create for the industry it's going to be applied into? Because I think many companies are still investing in the technology without having a foresight of how much impact is it going to have. So to bring it back to the IP and the ownership of ideas, I wonder if the big differentiator is going to be an algorithm or a product, or is it going to be the outcome delivered through a service? And that is something that's truly differentiative. Because if you line up a full value chain that sources the product, builds the software, delivers the service, and measures the outcome across many, many different ecosystems, across many different regions in the world, this is very difficult to copy. So once you manage to build all of those pieces together, you truly have a competitive advantage that doesn't really depend on IP, doesn't really depend on where you're headquartered, and doesn't really depend on how many lawyers do you employ.
Thank you, Hugo. Allan, in terms of a package, if you consider a package that you look for that will outline the features of the company that you want to come to RAIDiCAL, to be scaled up by RAIDiCAL, what are those features that you identify?
Well,
and talk vertical now.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of segue from localization to what the requirements are for a foreign company to actually do business in China. I've been in China, I was born in Taiwan, grew up in the U.S., been in China 24 years, right? Started in '97. I went back to China from the U.S. Never seen a faster growing economy in history, right? We're literally in the midst of history. So when we hawk back and look at what I'm doing right now in terms of landing, right? Local teams, not a problem. We know if they have the technology infrastructure and the know-how, it's worth investing, we'll invest. But the income inbound, we've done a lot of inbound work in the past, in Beijing, when I was with Garage Cafe, with Inaway, with Rocket Space, with what we're doing right now. I think the fundamentals that doesn't fit, right? If you're going to have founders who are going to have a tremendous amount of resistance and misunderstanding about IP in China, what does it come down to anywhere, right? When it comes down to intellectual property protection, it's that, are you protected, right? And to be honest, what the U.S. has brought up, okay, in terms of IP infringement, in terms of IP disengagement, that's a valid issue, right? If you build a controller for a wind power generator, and suddenly next day your partner goes out and builds the same thing and sell it for half the price, that's a problem. You raise it, and I think that from a cultural standpoint, for China or as a market, as a government, as a people, that's not a very proud thing to have people start to pinpoint certain issues. Copying has been happening for centuries. There have been fake teas who come into London, the UK. There have been knockoffs done by Japanese, Taiwan, Korea, not new. But the thing is, as consumers, as people in the business, we're just going to have to stand firm and say, hey, listen, this shouldn't happen. And you raise the alarm, and people will listen. The Chinese government will listen. The general public will listen. So back to the point about the verticals. Understanding whether or not, I don't think there's a risk per se, okay? It is a risk if you don't know the lay of the land. like what John was saying earlier, well, when Chinese companies come to London and go to the States, they expect to operate the same way. It doesn't work that way, right? The transparency is much more transparent. Can you have as good of a relationship in London and in Silicon Valley as you do in Beijing and Shanghai? Of course you can. But what happens is you better have a very good idea of what you want to do. And I think that's what we're looking for. We'll pre-incubate. We'll talk to the teams that are looking to get into China. Whether or not it'll work, we'll know, right? If you have no staff, you need everything, and you have no sense of what the strategy is, like what was mentioned about AI in China, then I think you'll have a problem. So those are the teams that probably won't touch. The ones we will touch is, hey, be an entrepreneur, right? Your DNA is about risk. It's about taking risks. It's about really taking up the challenge and say, listen, I want to be in China because we're ready. We have a product that's good for China, and we will find a partner, and those partner is going to be ones that I got to steal your IP, and I think that that trust needs to be looked upon and sought after. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Allan. Is there a time for a Q&A or time's up? Okay, time's up. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that and learned a few new things.